This is the Business Blackbook, where billion-dollar empires are built and collapse. Who runs the world? Go back 50 years, and that question had a clean answer. Two giants, two systems, two sides of a wall. The United States on one side, the Soviet Union on the other. Every country picked a lane. Every conflict had a backer. The world was simple because power was simple. Then the Soviet Union collapsed. And suddenly, there was only one giant left standing. The United States became the architect of global trade, the enforcer of global rules, and the cheerleader of global values. One superpower, one order, one direction. That world is now over. And what is replacing it is not what most people expect. Most people assume the next superpower is China. Some say it is India. Some argue the European Union. But here is what almost nobody is telling you. The next dominant force in the world might not be a country at all. Let that sit for a moment. Because to understand where power is going, you first need to understand how power actually works today. And to do that, we need to go back to three decisions, three mistakes, that broke the old world order and created the one we are now entering. The first mistake was Russia. When the Soviet Union fell, the West had a choice. You could bring Russia into the system, make it a partner, integrate it into Western institutions the same way Germany and Japan were rebuilt after World War II. That did not happen. Russia was left outside. A former great power, now in serious decline, watching NATO expand toward its borders, watching its global influence shrink year by year. The result is a country that is angry, isolated, and willing to do disruptive things to remind the world it still exists. The second mistake was China. When China was brought into global trade institutions in the early 2000s, the assumption was simple. Give them wealth, give them access, and eventually they will become like the West. They will adopt Western values, Western governance, Western priorities. That assumption was completely wrong. China got wealthy. China got powerful. But China stayed Chinese. It kept its own political system, its own values, its own vision for how the world should be organized. And now the United States is sitting across from a country it helped build that refuses to play by its rules. The third mistake was ignoring the people. For decades, globalization created enormous wealth, but that wealth did not spread evenly. Factories moved. Jobs disappeared. Entire communities were left behind. And the politicians who were supposed to represent these people kept telling them things were getting better. They were not believed. Trust in governments collapsed. Trust in institutions collapsed. And that frustration, that sense of being abandoned, created political earthquakes across the United States and Western Europe that the establishment is still trying to understand. These three forces together, a resentful Russia, an independent China, and millions of citizens who feel their governments no longer represent them, are the reason almost every major geopolitical conflict you read about today exists. And they are also the reason we now live in what serious analysts are calling a leaderless world. No single country sets the rules anymore. No single power enforces them. And into that vacuum, something new is rising. Now here is where most conversations stop. People debate whether America will recover its dominance, or whether China will replace it. But that framing misses something fundamental. Because the world is not moving toward one new superpower. It is splitting into three separate orders, each operating by different rules, each controlled by different players. The first is the security order. This one is still dominated by the United States, and it will remain so for the foreseeable future. No country on Earth can project military power to every corner of the globe the way America can. China is building its military rapidly, but that capability is largely regional. Russia had a fearsome military reputation, but the war in Ukraine has exposed serious limitations. They have lost over 200,000 troops. Their equipment has been depleted. International sanctions are making it extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. Nuclear weapons exist, but using them remains suicidal for any nation. So in the realm of raw military force, the world remains effectively unipolar. One dominant power. That is not changing in the next decade. The second is the economic order. And here, everything is different. The United States is still a powerful economy. But economic power does not follow military power the way it once did. China's economy is on track to become the largest in the world by 2030. The European Union runs the largest single common market on Earth and sets trade rules that every company operating inside it must follow. India is emerging as a major economic force. Japan still carries serious weight. No single country controls the global economy. Countries are not choosing between America or China economically. They are trading with both. They are investing in both. They want access to American military protection and access to Chinese markets simultaneously. That is a multipolar economic world where power is genuinely shared and will remain so. But the third order is the one that will define everything. The digital order. And this one is not controlled by governments. It is controlled by technology companies. Think about what happened in Ukraine after the Russian invasion. Western governments sent weapons and military support. That mattered. But it was technology companies that kept Ukraine alive in the digital space. It was their cybersecurity infrastructure that protected Ukrainian systems from Russian attacks. It was their satellite and communication technology that allowed the Ukrainian military to coordinate in real time. Without those companies, Ukraine would have gone offline within weeks of the war starting. The government might have collapsed. That is how much power these companies now hold. But it goes deeper than war. Technology companies now determine what information hundreds of millions of people see every single day. They shape public opinion. They amplify certain voices and suppress others. They decide which narratives spread and which ones die. The events of January 6th in the United States, the political chaos that followed, the spread of misinformation that made those events possible, were not caused by governments. They were enabled by platform decisions made in corporate boardrooms in California. And there is something even more profound happening underneath all of this. For most of human history, your identity was shaped by two forces: your biology and your environment, your genes and your upbringing, nature and nurture. That was the complete picture. Today there is a third force, the algorithm. The technology platforms you use every day are learning your fears, your desires, your insecurities, your ambitions. And they are feeding you content calibrated to those inputs. Your worldview, your political opinions, your sense of what is real and what is not, is being shaped not just by your life experience, but by decisions made by engineers and systems you never see and never chose. That is an extraordinary amount of power, and it is not held by any president or prime minister. Now here is the critical question. Where does this digital order go from here? Three possibilities are emerging. The first possibility is a technology Cold War. If the United States and China each pull their technology ecosystems inward, forcing their companies to align with government priorities, the digital world splits in two. A Western internet, a Chinese internet, two separate digital realities, two separate pools of information. The world's information infrastructure divided along geopolitical lines. The second possibility is a new globalization. If technology companies maintain their global business models, if they continue operating across borders and across political systems, the digital order becomes a new kind of globalization. Not trading goods, but trade in information, services, attention, and influence. A borderless economic and cultural reality layered on top of the divided physical world. The third possibility, and this is the one that should make you think carefully, is what analysts are calling a techno-polar world. A world where technology companies become so dominant, so embedded in every aspect of human life, that governments progressively lose their ability to govern. Not through revolution, not through war, but simply because the companies that control information, communication, finance, and increasingly artificial intelligence become more powerful than the states that theoretically regulate them. We are already seeing early signs of this. Think about what it means that a single technology executive can decide whether a sitting head of state has a platform to speak to the public. Think about what it means that private companies control the satellite infrastructure that determines whether a country can communicate during wartime. Think about what it means that artificial intelligence systems are making decisions in finance, healthcare, law enforcement, and military planning, and the governments responsible for those domains barely understand how those systems work. And on top of all of this, there are serious people who study these things warning us about threats that governments are almost entirely unprepared for. There are currently over 100 individuals in the world with the knowledge and the technical capability to engineer a new biological threat. That is not a science fiction scenario. That is a present reality. And the line between a private individual, a technology company, and a government is becoming blurrier by the year. Here is what a financially and strategically aware person needs to understand from all of this. The old question of which country will be the next superpower is the wrong question. It assumes that power in the 21st century works the same way it worked in the 20th century. It does not. Power is splitting across 3 different domains. Military power remains concentrated in the United States for now. Economic power is genuinely distributed across multiple major players. And digital power, the kind that shapes minds, controls information, and builds the infrastructure of modern civilization, is concentrated in a small number of private companies that answer to shareholders, not to citizens. The country that wins the next 50 years might not be the one with the biggest army or the largest economy. It might be the one that figures out how to govern the digital order, how to create accountability for the companies that now hold more influence over daily life than most governments do, and how to ensure that the power of technology serves people rather than consuming them. What the United States was to the 20th century, a democratic exporter of ideas and systems, it now risks being something very different. The world's largest exporter of tools that undermine the very democracy it once promoted. Whether that changes depends entirely on decisions being made right now by a very small number of people in very powerful rooms. And now you know how to read the map. And with that, the Black Book closes. Subscribe, and we will open the next page soon.